This is a Power 98.7 podcast. Now we're talking. Subscribe to Power 98.7 podcasts in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. There's more on power987.co.za.
6 minutes after 10. So, Advocate Mantula, I hope you are listening, because you had said that March, we should not forget that March is Human Rights Month. And you also spoke about the 1994 Bophuthatswana uprising, or the Mahikeng Uprising, as it was known at the time. So if you don't have an idea of what I'm talking about, so in 1994, in Bophuthatswana, there was a political crisis, a major one, which began after the then leader or president of the Bantustan, Lucas Mangope, who was the president of Bophuthatswana, attempted to crush what was then a widespread labor unrest and popular uprising, demanding the incorporation of the territory into South Africa pending non-racial elections later that year. So the protests became violent following Mangope's announcement on the 7th of March that Bophuthatswana will boycott the South African general elections. These escalated into civil service strike and a mutiny in the local armed forces, which was complicated by the arrival of the right-wing Afrikaner extremists, AWB, seeking to preserve the Mangope government. The chaos lasted for about 4 days before the president of Bophuthatswana bowed to pressure and agreed to allow participation in the upcoming elections. However, Mangope once again reversed his decision. The South African Defence Force responded by deposing him and restoring order on the 12th of March. And then there was that video that was all over the place, because at that time the Bophuthatswana crisis highlighted the deep unpopularity of the Mangope government and the Bantustan system amongst the residents of Bophuthatswana. And there was that televised shooting of 3 Afrikaner AWB militants by a black police officer, and people who were there would remember this. This proved to be a public relations disaster for the AWB and demoralized the movement, which was then intent on preserving the white minority rule. And to remember and reflect on the events that occurred during that period, we've got 2 people that were there. One of them is Thato Magogodi, as well as Bralitsatsi Bokaba. And good evening to you both, gentlemen. Thanks for making time. Thato, how are you?
I'm okay. Thato
Magogodi. Yes. Thank you. And then Bralitsatsi Bokaba, good evening.
Dimela morarre dimela le re Thato Magogodi brakwembu.
Thank you, Bahaitsu. Thank you for making time. Let's start with you, Thato Magogodi. What do you remember about the events that unfolded at that time in 1994?
Well, I think maybe to interact with the background you've just given, one of the critical things analytically to state about that chapter of our history is that you make the point that it was a labor unrest and so forth and so on. I want to actually argue that it was more than anything a multi-sectoral uprising, which can be safely called the popular uprising, because it had all sorts of motive forces involved. It was students, the youth, the workers, the peasants. But most importantly, what should be noted is that the youth were at the center, were the left center of this uprising, and they really put the Bob regime on a back foot. If I may just get slightly deeper into the issues, maybe it's important to note that the 1992-93 detachment, which we led, which included Baba Khanedi, Bo Vuyela Hlangwana, Bo Muthuti Shupinyane, Bo Diale Khansi, and others, was accompanied obviously by the detachment of the student movement led by Bokaba at the then Bophuthatswana University, who was also in the ranks of Mahikeng. This was a lethal revolutionary combination that outwitted the Bob regime to its final knees, and I think this is what conducted the final push. You know, I'm sure you've heard Lenin say, a revolution is impossible without the revolutionary situation. Furthermore, not every revolutionary situation leads to a revolution. So history needed a push. So this was the detachment, in my view, that, spanned the final push against the Bob regime that actually angered Mangube, who ultimately decided that, I can't stand these young people on the streets everywhere, sparking fires there and there. And he called the AWB, Terre Blanche in particular, who, unleashed his dogs of war on us, and they attacked and seized Mahikeng. Hence the deaths that took place there, which included Khosi Diseko in 1983, who were shot. Khosi Diseko comes from saying maybe Elia, and so forth and so on. So it was very interesting dynamic of a final push where the regime realized that it could not stand the fire of the youth that had led the struggle. So that's the essence for me of the historiography.
Bokaba, what gave you the courage? Because Mangube was feared at that particular time. Was it the advent of the release, I suppose, of the political leaders, the changing political landscape since the release of these political leaders, or was it something that was always brewing beneath, so to speak?
Kotane, let me just expand from what Magogodi has said. The homeland system or Bantustan system, which was generally called the separate development policy by the nationalist illegitimate regime, the apartheid regime, was conceived in the 1950s after the National Party won the elections, the white, so-called white elections in 1948. Now, 11 March 1994 was part and parcel of many struggles since 1950s of the African people opposing separate development, whether you find it in black townships, whether you find it in villages, and so forth and so forth. So Bophuthatswana was a flagship of the separate development. Now, the Mahikeng Uprising on that day, which was also preceded by the 10th, which was preceded by many other protest and labor unrest, youth, these things, was not only in Mahikeng. Garangwa people, in Winterfeld, Kemba, location, Tabanchu, Taung, and across the areas which was Bophuthatswana. So Mahikeng became an attractive site because it was the so-called capital city. So that some of us were fearless was because we were working on the shoulders of the our forefathers and our mothers and our fathers who opposed apartheid system in all its manifestations. Yeah. So we were just an organic development. And as Magogodi said, it was like the final push because, they like saying that the last kick of a dying horse. So during the last days of Bophuthatswana or Bantustan systems across, even in Bisho, we had that massacre of our people there. So this must not be an event or an occasion which is looked solely in the context of Bophuthatswana only. It was part of the major struggles which our people waged, whether they were in Venda, whether they were in Kwandebele, whether they were in Ciskei, in Transkei. So that was an expression. But what was very important is that those Boer commandos, the AWB, was just a continuation of the Boer commandos from Leopold Kruger. The reason why Mangube called them, all the illegitimate African leaders who were co-opted or cooperated with the Voortrekker, with the white regime all along, used to invite this, either the British the British soldiers or the Boer commandos to come and help them. So Mangube was not an exception. That is why he called them. So it was just a continuation. So the 11th March for us must not just become a Mahikeng thing. It's a national or even a continental a day, which as we go with the interview, will explain as to where we come from with it.
Where do you come from with it, Ntate Bokaba, before I go back to Ntate Thato Magogodi?
Maybe before Magogodi comes in, remember that Bophuthatswana was not just a creation out of its own. For example, Bophuthatswana, which is just a neighboring country, Lesotho, Eswatini, they are Bantustans on their own. They were created to suit how the British Empire so-called, they protected other people. That's why they were called protectorates. So these ones, they were called homelands because they were serving a particular objective, particularly for the Voortrekker, which were the descendants of the Dutch and the Afrikaner. So on that basis, the people in the so-called homelands were not fighting separate struggles from the national struggle which was taking place in South Africa. They were part and parcel of those struggles. That is why for us, even if we look at what happened, the issue is that can we say that the lives which African people, the lives which we lost on that day, for those of us who are living today, are we also, as those who are in the leadership, is our government also responding to what we are supposed to be doing for those people? And those are the things which we, particularly the so-called formerly oppressed, are we doing the right thing so that we are able to take Africa to another better level? And you look at this, all these things in that, for me, it's about that broader context, a Pan-Africanist context, which also affirms why people had to even lose their lives. So the loss of their lives by the Boer commandos, the AWB, must not just be in vain. We must be able to reflect, and as to where we are, almost 5 years after the so-called 1994 election.
So let me come to you, Thato. How do you then, because we are within the month that looks at these events, and it's Human Rights Month, and obviously this happened during March. To what extent are you preserving this memory? And to what extent are you then, on top of that, keeping it alive? Particularly, and I know it was a national event, but, undeniably, you cannot deny the fact that I suppose the people of the Northwest should be at the forefront of carrying this memory.
Well, I think as we interact with that question, it's important to make the point that whilst there is progress since 1994 regarding the things that we were fighting for, which includes freedom of speech, human rights, observation, better quality of life in general, which would talk to perhaps the fact that we've built, as an example, as the ANC government, more than 3 million houses since 1994. That would register as progress. But the reality is that we must also accept that there is some regression. If you look at our townships, like it was saying, which was what other people call a political free zone during the anti-pop uprisings. If you look at Mahikeng, there's regression in the quality of lives of our people, the cleanliness of townships and all of those things. And all of these things points to a fundamental point, that the people who were at the forefront of that struggle, the anti-pop struggle in particular, are now in the back burner. And the people who are now leading in government and everywhere in the ANC, most of them in this part of the world, not expanding it to the entirety of the liberation project. In this part of the world, which Mahikeng is, you find that those that were leading are now in the back burner. As a result, we have this regression because those that are leading now do not understand the revolutionary political conviction that drove that struggle that collapsed Bophuthatswana in search for the democratic dispensation. For me, that has to be taken into account as we debate how we move forward. And if you are to answer the part of the question that how do we preserve this day, it's important to note that if those that were not there are now leading the song, as Mzwaki Mbulu once said, you have a situation where there's a problem of memory. Don Matera says memory is a weapon. It's important that that we try and give voice to this in the best possible way, so that people understand the importance of this historiography, so that certain things must not be repeated in terms of the history and the social cohesion of this country.
Are you saying there is a lull in that regard?
Also make the point separate from the question that you are raising, because I know that there's a limitation of time.
Yeah.
But any liberation struggle anywhere in the world, if you study the history of all revolutions, has a final push. In the context of the national liberation struggle that was led by the African National Congress, of course there are other liberation movements. The final push, in my view, would have been driven by the Operation Vulindlela project that was led by Meg Maharaj and Sipho, which achieved in 3 years what the liberation movement would have anticipated to achieve in 30 years. In the context of Bophuthatswana and Uprising, these are some of the things that actually inspired us as young people in the forefront of the struggle at that time. We used to sing the song Operation Vula, and it inspired us to look at the final push and in terms of the struggles that we're pushing on the ground. I mean, the defiance campaign we used to hold. If you look at Mega City, it was a battle zone. We used to take young people during difficult times when people were scared to come out in the open wearing ANC T-shirts, have them hold hands and tell the police that we're wearing ANC T-shirts, you can arrest us. That on its own, accentuated the struggle and actually gave people confidence that actually defiance is possible and that the regime, can be challenged. So in the tapestry of the historiography, these are the things that we need to note.
Thabiso, you're in Menlyn, you've been holding for quite a while. Good evening.
Good evening. Thabiso, this is a very, this history unveiled in front of me, role-playing and everything like that. In Temba, there were activities that were taking place. In actual fact, Hamas Station, whereby the demarcation Temba falls under Northwest, and the then Bophuthatswana Hamas Station falls under Gauteng, which means we could assemble that side. Issue which is very, very much important. Issue of propaganda. The manufacturing of propaganda in apply to ANC plays a vital role in the downfall of Bophuthatswana. One, the propaganda, if you remember quite well, Thabiso, there was the first propaganda in the manufacturer, the civil servants, Mapodisa, teacher readiness, and the like, Bakubu Venda, TBB, Bakubu Venda, and the like, Limpopo. They will be getting, they have gotten their contributions, and then Bophuthatswana mangope utlo tabaka chelete atabela Israel ya di rich push. And that propaganda was actually eroded by Mr. Mangope. Ashura the civil servants they are protected, and there won't be such a thing. Second thing, the propaganda that was also applied was the one that was applied by the invasion, Bob Broadcasting Corporation, whereby the Bob Broadcasting Corporation was a journalist who was working by that time was pointed with a gun, and then a announcement is on a way to Israel has run away. And when people, because of the euphoria, something must happen in Bophuthatswana. The people in Bophuthatswana, I want to assure those guys, gentlemen, who, if they can tell the truth, I was an activist, I was within the ANC myself, but I knew and observed the strength that Mangope had on the people. The people in Bophuthatswana did want democracy, but they did like Mangope. They didn't just bite into the issue, the euphoria, but they were anticipating or something good can happen, the so-called democracy.
All right.
Then when the announcement was made, the people started going out and that is when Bophuthatswana was taken over. So I'm saying propaganda played a vital role in bringing about the Northwest, which is there, which is sickening. I played a role to destroy Bophuthatswana, which was great, which had a leader in development. Look at Northwest right now.
Okay, Taps, we got the point, my brother. We got to run. So, Mr. Bokaba, how do you respond to such sentiments? Because they are pervasive. You can't deny that such sentiments are pervasive. Thabiso has just alluded to some of those.
Yes, the first point, because of time constraints, is that I think my ANC-led government, particularly the Northwest government, has in fact not done the people who passed on that day a good service. This day was supposed to have been one of the days which must be known by the young people who are in the schools. Northwest was supposed to be the leader in terms of making sure that the 11th March becomes a rallying point for the South African people across across South Africa to understand where we come from in the context of the battles which were waged between the African people and the foreigners, whether they were British or the Dutch descendants and so forth, because you cannot exclude that, even if it was during negotiations period. So I'm saying that Northwest government moving forward must take this day very importantly, not only for Mahikeng. It must become a day which children must commemorate, children must understand it across South Africa. That's why the Afrikaner people, particularly those who are against the democratic dispensation, and some of our people who still have the wish of a Bantu stance, because we did not go deeper to educate our people about separate development. That is why you still have people who still wish that Bophuthatswana could have been here. So, but Magogodi has also spoken about service delivery issues and also economic issues. But Kotane, what was also we have failed since 1994 was to raise the level of consciousness of our people. If we could have done, make sure that through the schooling system, through the family structures, through various community structures, our people should be taught about how Africans were disintegrated and how we should come back, and there must be social cohesion amongst African communities, because sometimes when you are in Harangua, you listen to people arguing about the past, and you go to Lekabile or in Ogasi in Breds, you will find that these are the same people from the same families, but because some were not in so-called Bophuthatswana, how they look at where we come from is different, and it is because we have dropped the ball, particularly the ANC-led government, dropped the ball to unify, in particular, the African people. We rush to reconcile the Africans with the white people, the Europeans, instead of also having another process of reconciliation amongst the African people, because our histories in terms of the separate development also says a lot. Even amongst members of the ANC, those who live in Potchefstroom, still in their own way of looking at life, their sociology is different from the sociology like Magogodi was talking about, the anti-BOP activist. And we should not be at this time talking about that. We should become Pan-Africanist. We should become Afrocentric. We must look at life from an Africanist perspective, not looking at it in that. And it tells you that here, the ANC-led government and the ANC itself, as the so-called leader of the society, has failed our people.
Before I give you a chance to respond, Thato, I have to go to another Thato, Mosalangwe, who's a humanitarian and social activist from Mahikeng. Thato, good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Fine. How are you? Please go for it.
I'm Thato Molosangwe from Lomanyanin village in Mahikeng.
Yeah.
My brother, I'm crying tears out as I talk to you now. I'm regretting as well being an activist in 1992. Ne? What is happening currently? I was camping, protesting, collecting signatures, petitions to stop the government from grabbing old Bophuthatswana building departments, including Mega City that Thato Magogodi mentioned. All those buildings, even government buildings, they were sold to comrades. And from there, government is renting the same buildings Mangope built so that our people can be saved. What they did, I was camping outside when they saw community coming to sign signatures. A premier's office instructed the municipality to come and take away my tent, take away my petitions, take away everything, effort. I camped for 3 months, including Christmas and New Year. Right now, I walked from Mahikeng to Joburg. I'm talking to you now. My camp is in the street. I'm camping out of Zondo Commission. I just submitted, I did my submissions, complaining, asking Zondo Commission to intervene urgently because I took pictures. Children are eating from dustbins, children as young as 6 years old in Mahikeng. Okay. They sold everything, even flats. They grabbed the flats, they gave them to politicians, and now they saw that students can book. And I'm sleeping in the streets as I'm talking to you now, not because I don't have a place, because I'm bleeding inside. Okay. How can we destroy Mahikeng so badly?
Ndate Molosangwe, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thato Magogodi, what do you have to say? People are heartbroken. 2 callers already saying that they regret ever taking participation of those events in closing.
Yeah, I think I was the first to admit that there's a lot of regression. And the point I made earlier was that whilst there is progress, it is contrasted against regression, which is regrettable. And I mentioned the point that part of it is in terms of causality is because the people who are now leading our movement today in this part of the world are people who were not there in 1994, so they don't understand the revolutionary political conviction that drove the struggle that collapsed Bophuthatswana. Hence, all these mistakes that they are committing and blind spots that are causing all these concerns that my Pito, Thato is raising. I mean, I'm one of the people who's visited him in one of his camps, and I really understand where he comes from, and the symbolism that he's trying to raise his issues with. That's the first point. The penultimate point is that I think 11 March is history forgotten. You know, there's a very serious lopsided recognition of struggle history in South Africa. And one day when we have time, we must speak about it and the extent to which we need to talk about the possibility in future of equating 11 March to June 16, 21 March, and so forth and so on as an important struggle day, because this helps us with memory. You know, when memory is there in a people, you then manage issues of forgetfulness in the process, where people understand that we come from this part of the world and that certain things that come from this part of the world should not be repeated, which includes the atrocities caused on our people. But as we say all of this, we must also note that there is indeed progress since democracy. We cannot say all is bad. There are certain things that have been done. There's freedom of speech, there's human rights, there's better life relatively. It can't be argued that things are the way they were in 1994. But I agree with Bokaba, or maybe we've reached a point where we must, as one friend of mine likes saying, we must move away from where we come from much and talk about where we need to go. And we've achieved political freedom. We must now talk about economic freedom for the entirety of our masses, and talk about the issue of championing the needs and aspirations of our masses in the current period of time, so that we don't look at history with nostalgia that is not helping us to move forward.
I think that's a brilliant suggestion, and we should make time to talk about some of these issues. But right, so thank you very much. We are humbled. Thank you very much. That's Thato Mahikeng as well as Ralichachi Bokaba, who were there in the thick of things during the time when Mangope was deposed as the president of that Bantustan called Bophuthatswana.
You've been listening to a Power 98.7 podcast. For more podcasts, visit power987.co.za or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.